We'll conduct the meeting scheduled today at 5 o'clock, 401 Market Street, and I'd like to call this special meeting to order. Okay, we're going to dispense with opening ceremonies. So right now we have public comments and receipt of petitions. At this time, anyone will be allowed to speak on any matter other than personnel matters or matter under litigation for a length of time not to exceed 3 minutes. No council board discussion or action may take place on a matter until such matter has been placed on the agenda and posted in accordance with the law. Is there anyone who would like to speak about any matter, whether it's on the agenda or not?
Will be allowed to speak about?
Yes. Yes, they will.
And Mayor, I've got some comments from a citizen I would like to read into the record if I could.
Okay. Is it consent? Is it pertaining to one of the items?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then that would count as 3 minutes.
Sure, it's quick.
Okay.
So I just wanted to take a minute to praise David and the city staff for fixing a problem that we've been working on for a little while over there on Belmont and South Cherry. And I heard from the citizens that I've been interacting with and trying to get this issue solved. And I just wanted to share this email that they sent. This is from Mr. Tom Conklin. He just wanted to thank everyone for their help with the issue. The city's cleaned up the railroad tracks at the dead end. And I've seen surveyors up every day up and down our street and Cherry Street. It's been a long time coming, he said, but we on Belmont Street sincerely thank you for the concern in this matter with hopes that we can get our drainage ordeal under control. And he just wanted to say thanks again. So thank y'all for that diligent work. I know it's not been easy.
Thank you. Okay. The next item is the consent agenda and the consent agenda in which we are entering into city council, city staff and public into a workshop to discuss 3 different items that are on the workshop agenda. After that discussion of each one and proposal, then we will see if we need to go on with the next items on the agenda or postponed. So the first item is amend the code of ordinance regarding development standards. This is a question that was brought up by several councilmen to put on the agenda in order to help to avoid items like Liberty Lane that happened and Persimmon and such. So Nathan, you are up to start the conversation. If there is anyone who would like to speak during this time, please raise your hand.
Once we get in the
All right, once in the presentation, then you can come up and speak as long as you would like within reason. We don't do filibusters
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Nathan Dietrich with the Community Development Department. So we were asked to put together a short presentation in regards to development standards, specifically viewing on one of those standards called buffering. The next slide, please. So development standards casts a very large net, and it includes, but it's not limited to, all of our building codes, the International Mechanical Code, Plumbing Code, the setbacks, building height, signs, floodplain, parking and parking lots, land uses, primary and accessory, landscaping and tree requirements, screening and buffering, lot size, and building size. So when discussing things like development standards, it encompasses a very large items that we would need to discuss. But specifically tonight, we are going to be discussing buffers. What is a buffer? A buffer creates distance between land uses, commonly used when there is perceived incompatibility with adjacent uses. So buffers come in all shapes and sizes. They're physically and visually obscure things. They distance situations or land uses from the actual use or structure. And they might consist of berms or other filtration types for stormwater. Some of those are kind of shown here on the screen. You know, you'll have vegetated berms, or I'm sorry, vegetated buffers, and they kind of range across the board and what they could look like. That can be easily done through a code of ordinances, and you guys could prescriptively show us what you're wanting to see. Another one would be in conjunction with both a physical item like a fence to obscure that view, and along with vegetation. So there could be a combination thereof. Next slide. So within our ordinance today, this is how a buffer is defined. Our buffering and screening are defined within our ordinance today. Means a specified land area together with the planting and landscaping required on any building site, which may also contain a barrier such as a berm or a fence, where such additional screening is necessary to achieve the desired level of buffering between various activities. It shall meet that minimum requirements to provide a year-round visual obstruction. Screening is something very similar. We ask for, an example is that we ask for refuse containers to be screened throughout our city. So that is a good example of why we would ask or define screening within our ordinance. Next slide, please. The summary of our current Tomball buffering requirements. You know, the reason for why we have them is preserve and protect the privacy and value of our adjacent permitted land uses. And those really mainly are our residential uses. Is what we currently call it out in our current ordinance. The last known change that occurred within this particular section of the ordinance was in 2017 and 2018 when refuse standards were adopted, where opacity and masonry requirements were added to our ordinance. So in our ordinance with buffering right now is that the main requirement of our ordinance requires anywhere between a 6 and an 8 foot opaque screen would be erected between a lesser intense uses. Additionally, when that land use is industrial, you would also include a 10-foot landscape buffer would also be needed. Within our ordinance, that buffer itself is not prescriptive in nature. We do not ask or we do not call out a defined planting plan. We leave a lot of flexibility in interpretation when it comes down to what that might be. So we don't give levels of planting, like number of plants, distancing requirements. We don't say that it has to be a certain size of berm or a specific size of or type of fencing. And then also the main focus is buffering from multifamily, or what's called out in our ordinance currently is between multifamily and non-residential types of uses. So we wanted to kind of get an idea where City Council wanted to kind of go with this. So we went out and looked at a couple of other cities that we have knowledge of. One being where I used to work was in Baytown. Baytown is sort of similar to us. They do have some light industrial, but they also have a lot of heavy industrial uses out there. So what they call out in their particular ordinance is instead of calling it buffering, they call it compatibility standards. Very similar to that, is that it's all based off of land use. So when you have a heavy or intense land use, you would need to provide certain types of screening, open space, landscaping, or a combination thereof to lessen that impact. I gave an example of what they have called out from a commercial type use to more heavy industrial type use, where they even have buffering requirements between those. So we could be very specific when it comes to that and tell folks that, you know, between this land use and this land use, you're going to have a certain type of fence. You're going to have a 15-foot vegetated buffer with 30 or a tree planted every 20 feet with 7 bushes that is included in there. So we could be that specific, or again, we could, depending on where you would like to go with this, we could be very open and give more flexibility to that. Another thing within another city is that there are prohibited or frowned upon land uses that are adjacent to one another. One example being single family and industrial. In this particular case, that for any new development that is done, they frown or they prohibit that type of use to be adjacent to one another. Another city that we looked at was they also had land use buffers, but they used what was considered to be a point system, where there is certain allocations for points for different types of improvements. So an opaque masonry wall would receive a 15 points. And in this particular case, for this land use, or they actually signified it into two different types, type A and type B, depending on the intensity of the use. And so you would have to provide at least some sort of landscaping along with a certain amount of points that would be involved in with that type of land use. So there again, we can mix and match and shape that any which way you'd like it. But this is another example of how another city goes about using buffers. So the direction, we're looking to what is the goal, what we'd like to do, so we can formulate a plan and being able to adopt that plan to your liking. We want to make sure that, is this something that you would like to take priority at this particular time, or would this be something that's more better associated with our up and coming comp plan amendment or update? We could do some zoning updates and some text amendments along with that. We want to make sure that we would like to include at that particular juncture, the development community making that decision. We want to have, do we want to have flexibility in implementing these types of buffering requirements? And I just want to remind folks is that usually when we adopt these types of things, they aren't retroactive in implementation. It's usually for new development that comes into the city. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or would love to hear from you.
Okay, any questions for Nathan?
You mentioned in numerous instances the buffering between types of uses, with lesser use being, or less intense use being mentioned. What about the buffering between identical uses, single family residential and single family residential, where you have basically a forest behind an established subdivision that was sold off, the forest was sold off, and during the development process, the developer came in and clear cut all the way up to the property line. That's the thing that is very, very disturbing, and obviously very disruptive to folks that have been in a house in an older subdivision for 9, 10, 15 years. So how do we take steps that will minimize the impact of new development on existing development?
Well, I guess that can be tailored to however you'd like to see it. You know, you're going to hear folks will come back and say, this is my property and it's zoned to be used as such. Unless we place certain requirements that need to have distancing or certain amount of landscape buffering between like uses or maybe unlike uses, that would need to be called out within the ordinance for us to be able to enforce it.
So, we could even look at the similar lot sizes, or not go from a drastic SF6 to an SF20 or something like that. And when it comes to the lot sizes, where you've got the compatibility of similar sized homes and similar, not identical size, but similarly sized lots.
Yeah, we could look at that. We definitely could look at that.
I think where I'm headed with this is it easier to do this through an ordinance, or is it easier to do this through a tree preservation system where, trees over 4 inches, things like that, can't be cut down?
So
without a permit or without some sort of a survey by an agronomist, is that it? Arborist, okay.
So I think you could do a combination thereof on how you would want to achieve what you're looking to do. There's definitely pros and cons that go along with whatever direction you take. Both of what you just spoke about are very polarizing things within a community, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't, research and look into what those steps might be. And then we choose we choose the path that's best for Tomball.
That's the direction I'm interested in. Is that something that's, amenable to council?
Nathan, I do have a question. Is there a normal distance in our code between one development and another? Is it 20 feet? Is it 10 feet?
So there are certain buffering requirements. Usually, in most cases, it is just a fence. However, when I did bring up before, if there is an industrial type use or in light industrial, they do ask for a 20-foot landscape buffer. But again, that wasn't prescribed there. I guess you could make some assumptions when a landscaping buffer is there, but again, prescriptive in how it needs to be planted isn't there, but that's something that we can always improve it.
So a 20-foot even between residential and residential?
No, that's the 20 feet that I just spoke of is only
Industrial to
between,
residential?
yes.
Okay. Is it possible to do that much from residential to residential? If we put that in the
I
ordinance?
don't think you can do 20 feet. I
20
don't think
feet's
that
too
would be
much?
reasonable. Because you have utility easements that run along the back property line and things like that.
Well, that would be, the utility easements are part of that buffer, aren't they? They're not.
No, well, so if there's utilities in those easements is usually why we have those utility easements. And if they have, say sanitary or water and they have to be worked on, then you would have to remove those trees and those other amenities in order to work on them. So we kind of, at this particular time, we do not want them to be planted. Would be a good way to say it.
So we're talking utility easement 10 feet, 20
Yeah.
feet further, which is
So then you look at,
approaching really losing a lot of property.
yes,
You
ma'am.
could do 10 feet utility and 10 feet of forest.
I was thinking 5 foot off the property line, if there's a tree larger than a set size, the tree has to stay. And then you can go another 5 foot to utilities. I've 10 foot utilities, yeah, that's great. I've just had my yard marked, fence put in. Our phone line is about 15 feet into the backyard. But we didn't do a pool.
Okay. I know that there are certifications for cities to become green cities. Have we looked at what those parameters are in their development standards? Have Tomball wanted to be a certified green city? Magnolia is a green city, certified green city.
I have not. We did look into that scenic city. And we did look into there. We would need to make some changes to our ordinance in order for our ordinances, in order for us to, I think, be able to acquire that sort of distinguished award. And so I'd be happy to look into a green city and see what those steps are. And then we could always include those types of changes to our ordinance with that direction in mind.
There's also a deal called Tree City.
Tree City.
Yeah, Tree City USA. And
Yep,
that would
that's
need
San
to-
Antonio.
yeah, so with the Tree City USA, I'm familiar with because we adopted one with the previous municipality I was at. With that, you have to have a tree and preservation ordinance included. You would have to have a city forester on, whether it's by retainer or by, if that person's on as an employee, a full-time employee. And there's other specifications that go along with it. So there's a lot of different steps that need to be taken. It doesn't mean that it's out of reach. It's just one of those things that we would need to assess before we go down that road.
And that would affect if we decided to go for one of be a tree city, a green city, a scenic city, that would affect the development standards that we're talking about now.
Yes, yes, it would. And it would also impact from a Tree City side of things on how we as a city plant in our public right of ways.
I don't make a lot of land and trees. So, council have any comments on any of those things?
This is what this is exactly, Nathan and I've talked about this for months. tree ordinances and stuff. So no, I'm right behind it all the way. Nathan, doesn't Harris County have a forester person? I thought we looked that up, that you can use.
They probably have one. We would, yeah, I'll have to look into that to see if how we would be able to utilize
They
them.
have one, so it's not a cost to us to get that part of it.
Okay, I'm not sure how that completely works, but I'd be happy to look into that for sure.
And the other thing, I want to see this change some because wooden fences stuck up between industry, 6 foot tall doesn't help you any. And everything. I mean, truthfully, you're still looking right over their backyard if you're in your house.
That's why there's that 20-foot standard setback between industrial and residential, and that's gonna be landscape.
But you could do I don't like wooden fences because I've got them run down my side now, but it's shooting. And everything, but there is a deal, there's a screening shrub one city has, where it's actually that you can plant they're 6 foot tall, they go 6 foot, same height as our fence, and it makes a solid barrier and everything. And they gave you a choice of multiples to do and everything. That's because the way ours is written right now, you stick a wooden fence up, that's good.
So do we need to look at increasing the fence height to 10?
That one, 10-foot fence and stand up. Is the weather conditions right now down here.
They built the one across the street from me, a 10-foot fence, and what they do is the posts are out of metal. And the bracings out of metal. And then they put the wooden 10-foot slats up against it. That's how they do it.
And is there any buffer between that?
That's it.
So there's no green buffer, there's no anything.
That's it.
And we don't really know what the green tree scenic rules are yet.
I do not.
Any other?
So,
other comments on?
so right now, the only thing we have in our ordinance for between residential and industrial is landscape.
A landscaping and a fence, there would be a required fence that goes
6 feet.
Okay.
6 to 8 feet is allowed. And then
And
anything of above 7 feet needs to be engineered.
now in the general scope of that buffer, can parking lots be considered a buffer?
Currently, I guess you could have a buffer.
Not necessarily in what we have written, but in the scope of
So in
the world of buffering.
Sure, so the way we did it, and I'm just gonna go to something that I'm familiar with, is that Baytown, what we did is that we prescribed there to be a certain amount of green, actual green space, whether it was grassed area, most of the time that's what they did, but then there was a certain setback for the building, and then after that grassed area, then you could have a parking lot, and that would be all encompassed within that same, that buffer amount.
Be part of that buffer.
Yes, but my suggestion would be is that to prescribe that, so there isn't any interpretation.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, I've looked at several different ordinances, zoning for different communities. And specifically between residential zones and property abutting industrial. And they talk about the boundary line can be landscaped. And then the remainder may be used for all-street parking purposes. So a parking lot, or berm.
And I believe for me at least is that what is the goal, right? So if the goal is to have distancing between the property line and wherever the structure starts, or is it what type of land use is it? You know, is there outdoor storage? Do you want that to be buffered too, right? So then you have to think about where the lighting goes when in those parking lots and how that is going to be adjacent to certain types of uses. And so
Yeah.
all of it's all kind of interwoven for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, and our industrial park is light industrial, is that right? It's not heavy. And so that takes on a different role in terms of what these buildings and what they do in the buildings. And most of what, from my understanding, is being done is the manufacturing, the construction, the whatever the business is predominantly done inside the building. Is that correct?
In our park.
And we don't have cement plants that have mountains of aggregate and stuff like that that are stacked outside.
Lay down yard, the majority, and that's all in our deed restrictions, the majority of the activity has to occur inside the building.
Okay,
And so we do have those restrictions in the park, but that's through our deed restrictions.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
and I think that's very important to note because
that's right.
yeah, because when a person comes in and zones within light industrial, not all light industrials are made equal. So in the TEDC park or the light industrial park, those deed restrictions do enforce all of those other rules and regulations.
Yes, it adds to that
Yes, sir.
buffering, so to speak, whatever.
Yes, sir.
Because that some of that noise, whatever it is, can be closed up in a building and you don't have that. That comes to my mind with this. The other part to this is that, in this particular piece of property that we're going to discuss, in that transition to Paul's property there, he's kind of got a built-in buffer with his open pasture. That's one good thing. Our deed restrictions are going to help us in the park to kind of hold down any noise or contaminant or whatever, if there's any to be at all. And then so the other factor I think has to be considered is that, with future land use now encompassing both sides of Persimmon in terms of industrial or commercial development in the future, we have to remember that whatever we put in, that if it's a wall or whatever, that you don't want it too permanent, because in the future that it might have to be knocked down because that industrial park may extend further. I don't know when that would happen. I don't know. Paul sold his land. I don't know. That's all pie in the sky. But my point is that, if I heard a 10-foot wall and, that's a pretty big structure, and you're talking about, masonry or something that would be somewhat permanent. And if that park goes further down the road in the future, that would have to be taken up and extended further down. So I think those things need to be thought of and considered as well. I kind of, the other part of it is, if we put something in there, what role the city is to maintain it. And that can become very difficult, I would think, especially in the landscaping. We have to be very smart about our landscaping in terms of what that turns into and how it's maintained, both for the property owner on the industrial side as well as the citizen on the other. So all those things need to be thought of.
Agreed.
The thing that I'm trying to get to is that we've got to minimize the impact of new development on existing development. We just have to.
No doubt.
So if we can come up with a set of goals, guidelines, ordinances, whatever it takes to make that happen. And, we're not going to make everybody happy. We're not going to satisfy completely everybody, but if we can get to some accommodation to where we're just not having happen what happened up off of Brown Road. I think that's the focus. I mean, we live in the woods. And we need to be able to maintain some of those woods. And if the city, can't go out and buy the land and make a park out of it, put trails in it, then, we have to do something with the development guidelines to fix it.
I got a question. Kelly, didn't you say when we were doing this last time, that wasn't gonna be part of the industrial park? It was gonna be separate from the industrial park? this
Yeah,
land?
so the two lots that we own, we are not going to annex them into the park because they are separated by that drainage channel. And they're not contiguous. We have a two lot in the middle. And so rather than trying to annex them into the park, make them subject to the assessments, which they're not really benefiting from. What we decided to do is keep them out of the park, but keep deed restrictions that are the same standards as the park.
So you will keep the deed?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I.
That would be part of any land sale. If I would make one comment, and it's, I think, to the point on the Liberty Lane project. One thing we can consider is a no-clear zone around the perimeter of new developments. So that if they are adjacent to existing single family or whatever developments, they have to maintain a no-clear zone so that they're not able then to go in and clear cut between those two. That's a good way to keep that tree boundary versus having an additional landscape requirement.
And the no clear zone, how deep is that after the easements? 10 feet?
It really depends on what you want to do. The Woodlands has one, I think theirs is 20 feet, but I believe it's 10 feet on each side. So depending upon who the developer is, if it's an established single family development that's adjacent to it, like Liberty Lane, when you're going in, they may have different requirements where they compare the full 20 feet. I'm not sure exactly on all the details, but the no clear zone would be a way to achieve that so that you're not allowing them to go in their pet up to the property.
That would maintain the tree height that's there. You wouldn't have to worry about replacing that. And that should qualify for any green tree scenic that comes up.
And you also use that towards their landscaping requirement.
That would be part of their 20 or 30% landscaping
Yeah.
requirement.
Following up on what he was asking, and maybe I'm confused. Once the buffer goes up, the city doesn't maintain any buffers.
No, it would all be on private property.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
we
So
wouldn't
the
be
buffers
doing
aren't,
any of
yeah, we're not taking ownership of the buffers.
that. No, that's what I thought.
Yeah, we're enforcing what the ordinance would ask.
Okay, that's
So,
good.
but there are some other potential
Those guys.
situations.
Nathan, who pays for this? I mean, let's say it is industrial, they own the property.
Mhm.
And it's, let's say that they've got to give up 1 acre, that they pay 200 grand for, put this 20-foot buffer in. Who's gonna pay for that? What we've been told by our real estate consultant is that it's a half and half deal. The person on the other side pays half, the person that owns the property pays half. I mean, somebody's got to pay for this expensive proposition. And who wants to give up $250,000 worth of land to put a buffer in?
Agreed, and that's where, as it said before, to Councilman Parr, is that there are pros and cons that go along with all of these recommendations. So it's gonna need to be weighed out to see what is, well, to answer your first question is that it would be up to the property owner to pay for. And again, depending on the improvements that you're doing, and I'm not sure which ones you're referring to, is that
It
20 or
doesn't
half
matter
and
where
half,
it is.
right?
I don't care where it is.
It's usually the
It's gonna be
first,
lane, and they've got to give up whatever it is, a 10-foot or 20-foot
sure,
buffer. They're basically giving away $250,000 to put those trees in there. So who's gonna, is that gonna slow down development? Is that gonna stop development? Is the developer gonna say, hey, I don't think I want to give $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 plus put this buffer in, I'm not moving here. What?
yeah, no, and that's a valid point. I mean, that's, and yeah.
That's their
And
choice.
so-
That's a developer's choice.
Right, and so that, again, what's the palette of of council, what's the palate of the city? And so that's what we're trying to find out, right? So,
And Bill, I mean, y'all still have a 20-foot setback on landscape between your property and the adjoining properties, correct?
It's actually, when it's, it's a single family, it's gonna be from the type of the building. So part of the building, but the building is-
Okay, so I mean, Paul, y'all are already dealing with that.
Oh, yeah.
But
But
that-
I'm not
that
talking
issue.
about it. We're talking about the city here. We're not talking about the EDC or the deal with Paul. We're talking about the city.
Right.
Whatever you do here goes for the whole city of Tomball. Once you change that ordinance,
That's why we're having the discussion.
right, it's for the whole city. It's not just for a certain aspect of the
Right.
city.
that's correct.
Once you put that in, it's in.
And, just to make sure we're precise. These two lots. I didn't think we were doing the full deed restriction on these two lots, or is it somewhat less restrictive?
I think architectural standards as far as what the building has to look like, all of those standards are gonna be in special provision amendments to the contract. So
Because I know we talked about, that was an idea, like, let's not just offer the land, let's put some restrictions in, but I wanted to make sure that was the way we were doing it.
So they're subject to the full deed
Yeah, it
restrictions.
sounds like. it. I know it's-
I think they would be, so we have, we have a list of uses that are not allowed in the park, we have a list of, basically development standard regulations for materials, those type of things that the state can no longer enforce, but we can through our deed restrictions, so that's what we're carrying over in special provision addendum. So that would go, let's stay with.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak? Martinez says, this is an informal. This is informal, please come and speak. Paul, if y'all would like to come and speak, the Martinez, would y'all like to come up and speak? We'd like to hear, this is public, city, and
There's so many things, Mayor, Council. The fact that we want to buffer between industrial properties or between dissimilar areas, industrial and residential, that's great. And there's areas that should be done. When you do develop a commercial area and as a developer, you're told that you need to invest $250,000 in land to buffer your property away from other properties. All you're doing is creating a more valuable property. Who are we going to get? And IBM will move in, not the dirt yard, because they want to pay the higher rents and have a nicer place. So do we want the nicer clientele, a high-tech commercial in areas in Tomball? Yes. Cleaner, much nicer, higher rents. That's the way to go. Then the next notion would be the tree ordinance, which would affect residential from residential to residential. Well, that's why our big fight was to stop the 4,000, 5,000 foot lots, because when you build a house on a 4,000 foot lot, you can't do anything but clear cut. It's impossible to build that house. You got 2,000 foot footprint, you got a driveway, you got 4,000 foot of land. Are you gonna leave that one little tree? Just mow them all down. And so then if we increase the size of the lot, then you do have the discretion to have a house and the trees around it, SF20. No one's gonna knock down all the trees, somebody might, but then you'd have the additional ordinance of keeping you from knocking all the trees down. Like over on Hicks, they've mowed down all the trees on both sides of the street. That was that owner's prerogative. He wanted to knock all the trees down. The other guy didn't. But he can't build a house on the entire acre on that property. So we've got setbacks where you can force somebody to have so much land around their house. Now, are you going to keep them from cutting the trees down also? Those are way two different things. And you can't keep cutting trees down on a tiny lot. I was very saddened to hear that we've invited Costco to come to town, because I spoke to everybody I could talk to, and nobody I spoke to said, that's a great idea. My brother-in-law who lives in Magnolia says it's a great idea because he doesn't have to drive to 1960 to go to Costco now. And nobody here would go to Costco on 1960 and sit in their car at 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody. but we've invited that here to our little town. I don't know what's gonna happen when that entire cow pasture floods like it's already done twice, where it was a sea from 249 all the way to Cherry on Hallsworth. And then we've got all those houses behind the new Costco. That's gonna be a disaster. But I don't even understand the whole idea of that Costco would be a good idea. It's lessening the development. And of course, the increasing of the value of each house, each commercial property only is great. It's good for us. If you want to dumb down the values and say, put 50 houses on a smaller area, well, then you're going to get 50 houses in a smaller area and you're going to knock all the trees down and you're not going to have what you want. This is a forested area. And the only way you can have it, small house, large lot. That area behind 240, no, 2920 and 2978, where the big oil derrick is. The big developer wanted to come in there as a cow pasture. So most people really don't mind, but wouldn't it be nicer if the city put a street right, a little L street right there, bought the land, subdivided it and said, land for sale. Who wants a 2-acre lot? Who wants a 1-acre lot? And then the city doesn't have to make money. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But that's what happened in downtown Tomball 100 years ago. It was subdivided. It was owned by the plat and they platted it all up. And if the city could just make 1.5 to 2-acre lots, they wouldn't have to put sewer in because everybody would have a septic, run some water lines. Bigger lots, bigger houses, instead of some tin buildings that somebody might want to put up there to maximize their return. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
Sir, would you say your name and address for the record? Sorry, we didn't get that.
Max
sorry.
Martinez, 29514 Liberty Lane.
I got too informal, didn't
We all know.
I? Needs to be on the recording, that's right. Okay, and Paul, please say your name and your address.
I'm Paul Medink. I'm on 1631 Persimmon. And I agree with a lot of things Matthew said. I hate to see these trees being mowed down everywhere you go. And there's cement going in. And it looks like of course they come back, I guess, after 25 or 30 years, you have some trees. But that's something that, makes us feel like we're not in the middle of Houston. And so the trees, and I don't know how you crack this nut, first thing I'll tell you. But the only thing that I've come up with in my head that somehow seems doable, enforceable, and something that you don't have to come back later on and go, you didn't, you need to fix this or that, is it's a good fence. And I did some looking around today at fences, and I've owned enough wood fences. That's ridiculous. I'm not coming back to fix my wood fence every 5 years or whatever it is. And I think if you want something quality that the city, that's a standard, then you go ahead and put yourself in one of these cinder block fences. And you block off all the noise, and you get one 8 foot tall. You block off everything you can see. It's not as good as, forest being back there, but I think you have to make a clear line between this is where this kind of property starts and ends, and then this is another part here. I'd hate to, be on one side asking somebody, you're not keeping your bushes up over there, what you let everything die, you don't want to get into fights. And so the only thing that comes to my mind is a fence. And as far as what a fence costs, I think the standoff business, green area, unless it's a tree, I don't know how much good it does you. I mean, if you got a good fence, but, I don't, I don't see any other good way, or not, it's not a good way, but at least, you know, you've got some privacy. And if you want to dress up your side of the fence with, you know, everything from stone to whatever, you know, you're free to do it. But as far as paying for it goes, you know, I just heard at our last meeting that the value of this land has gone up $100,000 in the past year. Well, there's your money right there. I mean, if you got, if you want to invest and change, you know, residential over to commercial because it makes money, well, no, there's the money. It's the cost of doing business. And I think that when you do something like this, you need, you know, you need to take care of your citizens too. I understand about tax revenue and money and coming in, but you don't need people talking about you know, how they got run over and you know, couldn't do nothing about it. And here's what I got. And anyhow, I guess the fence is the only thing that I'm you need a big, strong fence. It's gonna stay there. It doesn't require any maintenance for 20 years, maybe more. And it's a one-time deal. And as far as the trees go, I don't know how you crack that nut, because I'm gonna hate to see all those trees get mowed down. And it's gonna happen all around eventually, even if they put houses in, they'll mow them all down. I mean, I had a home builder that's interested in the area. He was telling me 3.5 houses per acre. I'm going, I don't know how you get 3.5 houses on an acre. Anyway. I hate to see the trees go, but you know, if we have to live with encroaching development, we need a good fence.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? So summarize a consensus. Do we have a consensus about trying to do tree preservation ordinances or a tree city or scenic or green space? Or Kelly, your idea of the no clear zone, to incorporate that into our development standards. And the cinder block fence, which does make a lot of sense. It's
Well,
more
but,
expensive to put in.
I've got some ideas on the fences also. I mean,
But-
you see these large sound barrier
Yeah.
type fences along the freeways that are panels,
Mhm.
and they're built to stay forever and ever and ever. And that might be an alternative to a wooden fence or some other, a cinder block fence. Certainly would be able to be erected a lot quicker.
Okay, so some enhanced fencing. So.
There
in-
is that fence down on Cherry. With that last subdivision, Cherry,
I think they
What-
use.
that- I don't know what that
variety of it.
kind of fence is. Is it, is it a masonry type of, that looks really nice.
Going into the woodlands on Huff Smith on the right-hand side, that whole subdivision's got it. And it's a sound barrier.
Yep.
So they put it down Champions 30 years ago and it's still standing up. Like, it's got some graffiti on it, but it's still standing there.
They get pressure washed.
Okay.
Barely. I was playing
Golfer, I don't want you to talk to me, golfer.
You want to argue, it's barely standing, and it was about 20 years ago. It's barely standing on Champions. I was in the woods over there and saw it the other day.
Yeah.
So you're talking about your golf acuity, huh?
I was looking for somebody else.
Somebody
Oh,
else. I knew that was bad.
So,
them out.
in order to give Nathan some direction as to what to come back to council with, we need to be able to give him direction for what the city needs to do to come back so we can finalize these development ordinances. Because we would need to finalize these before we can move forward with decisions on the Persimmon project. So that is, that's kind of where, that's why we're having this. So the directions for Nathan are enhanced, looking at enhanced fencing, coming up with buffering between residential and commercial residential, and stop me if I'm missing something, please. And also seeing if whatever we come up with to be either the no clear zone or tree preservation ordinance, tree city, green city, scenic city, if there are ordinances can help to qualify for what it is that it said in those certifications. Is that anything else I'm missing? Is that?
The only thing I'd like to add is that to base your decision off of going maybe to a Tree City USA, Scenic City USA, those are all going to take time, and probably more than, I would say, closer to maybe 6 months to a year on some of those for sure. So if some of the direction I think we may need to take if we're looking to give a decision, I'm not sure what the time frame that you have for this decision to make, but
Well, it's not becoming one of those. It's finding out what are the rules and do those rules fit inside
Gotcha.
now
Okay.
for our ordinances? No, we're not going to become yeah, I'm sure
Right.
there's a process you have to go.
yes,
through.
ma'am.
But if it says have a 8-foot green buffer between things, and if that is in what we've discussed today, then let's put it in.
Gotcha.
It, it helps to satisfy. We're not going to become we're not going to take, it'd be nice to become that, but that's not going to happen within a month.
No, we're not
that we need
talking
to
about
do.
the tree ordinance or the preservation of trees or any of that. at this
Well,
time.
it's toward, yeah, not passing that ordinance. I don't think we can pass that ordinance that fast, or can we?
I don't think we've even discussed it.
Right.
Yeah, it's-
No,
we
it's
would
just
not be able
finding
to do
out
that.
what the
We need more
rules are
details.
for those items.
There are some things that we can change, like from a landscaping side. So if there are some things within that you want to see, like say maybe some plantings for a buffer between different land uses, we could add that into the zoning ordinance.
Or even similar
Um,
land uses.
Mhm.
Correct. Without going into that great, because some of it's going to be that you have to have a public hearing for it. Others, depending on where you place it in the ordinance, we could use chapter 18 in our building ordinance to enforce different things. So we'll come back with some suggestions.
And I think that no clear zone.
Well,
Is that
again,
something that
just
can
just
be
depending on the depth of the no clear zone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because especially on a residential subdivision. That could be onerous. That could be more than onerous for a residential subdivision.
If we had a no clear zone when Liberty Lane was
If we
done,
had,
we would not be having the problems that we have.
if we had at least a 5-foot no clear
And so
zone,
that's.
then I think we would have been
would be
okay.
great If we'd have had that. Yeah, but with the no clear zone, that is something the developer would have taken into account in coming up with the size of their houses and the lots. But we didn't have that. So I think that's,
Yeah, 'cause
be
the
something to look at.
developers are bright guys. They're gonna look at something, they're gonna look at the rules and go, can we make this work? With these size lots, or are we gonna have to change the lot configuration?
that's what they do.
That's what they do. They still buy the lot, they still buy the land, they still do the development. They just have to adjust what they're trying to do. And if it makes sense to do it that way, they do it. If not, then there's somebody coming down the road 6 months from now, that'll maybe be a little bit brighter.
And the fences, do we want enhanced fencing? As y'all brought up,
I want to ask
The
Kelly a
golf
question
course
on
and-
personal real property. What is your northern boundary? How long is it? You got a just rough estimate. 300 foot, 600 foot? Because it's not many acres.
On the east side, it's 420.
So you're talking 420 foot. Those are in 10-foot sections, I think. So you're talking 40 sections of the,
Line span, and I think there's.
oh, the 8. Okay. So you're talking.
are there any, oh, go ahead.
And council, just to kind of do it. As you know, this is a big topic and we can cover a lot of different areas and we can definitely go down a lot of rabbit holes. But I think that if we can condense the things that staff needs to look at, we need to look at options for buffering between existing and new development. Doesn't matter what land uses. That's topic one. Maintain the buffering between different land uses. It didn't sound like there was a lot of change that needed to be looked at between the different land uses, what we already have.
So I think that one is pretty well, the different types of barriers that are considered, because there's one for more vegetative, so maybe we look at different options for adding barriers of vegetative types. And then we can look at some of these other ones like the no clear zone, because there's a lot of unintended consequences by doing any one of these things. We absolutely hear one side and one perspective, but there's also a different side. And so we've got to really not do one thing and then cause issues somewhere else. So I think that if we take this in bite-sized chunks and look at those and come back with some different options, then it's gonna be a process. I don't think that anybody can bring something back and then it's gonna be perfect and that's what we're gonna vote for. So it's gonna be a process, and I think I suggest that we look at it in those bite-sized pieces.
Does that include the fencing?
Yes, that would be the barrier.
Okay, David, on that situation, we can actually stay between industry and residential. It has to be this type of fencing. Can't
Correct.
we? Because that's the biggest problem.
We have that now.
Like they're wanting the solid, not wood, because I'm just like him, wood does not last 3 to 4 years.
We just refine those requirements of what types are acceptable.
But then we also have to figure out, as Bill said, the cost of it, because
I
you
think
don't want
that's
to run
the other side.
everybody else out.
That's the other side to it. I mean, you can actually put in something that, but
They can't
somebody has
afford
to pay.
Well, Woodlands has done an unbelievable job of that. Putting things in and people still come.
Let me ask this question, Nathan.
Mhm.
The suggestion that Kelly had, no cut area.
Mhm.
Could that area be included in the green space?
Yeah, I mean, what she said is very similar to a buffer, right? So it's how you define the buffer. So whether it's a no clear zone, whether it's you want to do 10 feet of this and maybe 5 feet of this, and then have a fence on the interior of that, right? So it's however you want to define it. So it could be a little bit of all pieces of it, right? A combination thereof is sometimes the wording that's used, right? You call it out. How I've done it in the past is that we call it out as screening, not necessarily fencing. So you can use fencing, vegetation, distance, you can use it all. So as long as you guys, or as long as we all figure out and we give you the proper options, you steer us down there, we'll come up with some wording for it.
We want to make sure that we don't, the unintended consequence with that is who maintains the buffer? On the fire side, of course, then the fire break. Then it comes into how it's going to be maintained. Is it going to be underbrush? We already have issues with people camping in different areas. And so that those are the type of things I want to flesh out before we just say, well, it makes sense to have that no.
I don't think that any buffer that we're proposing, especially between residential, would enter into, being a separately fenced area.
That's where it has to be specifically prescribed.
Right, exactly.
And that's the thing that we need to make sure that we address some of those things, so that way we cover those when we bring a suggestion.
It's just, it's like, okay, I've got 3 trees in my backyard. Great, so I can landscape around my trees and stuff like that. I just, unless they're diseased, I can't cut them down.
One thing I will mention, you have to be careful with location fences, because if you put them in and they're not on a property line, then you have issues down the road with first possession. So if you're kind of stacking them, that can become an issue, and it's really kind of on one way. Who's been using that could come next to it. So that's just to mention, if you're looking at the location of
Yeah, it becomes an
fencing beyond the property.
it becomes an encroachment on somebody's
Correct.
property during on the title policy. Yeah.
Anyone else want to speak? Okay.
So just what is the timeline to move this along? So, because they have letters
I'm
of
sure you can
intent.
have something next week.
I'm sorry.
That's my concern.
I do know CPR, so
Yeah.
you're okay, Nathan.
How quick do you need to kill?
To be honest, I think there's two separate issues here that we don't, you've got the zoning issue, and then you've got development standards. And development standards are standards that change through the ordinance process, through, changes to the zoning ordinance. The rezoning really is independent of that. You really don't tie development standards specifically to a rezoning. Those are done through the development standard process. So as far as timing, yes, we do have offers on at least one of the lots. And so that is, could we just sit on the property?
Okay, David, if we rezoned it, it would be rezoned under the ordinances that are in place today.
But it's, right,
Is that
there's,
right?
Zoning is one thing and development is something.
Okay, with development, okay. If we rezoned it today and let them go on and do what they want to, then we couldn't come back a
No.
month from now and say, you gotta put these in.
But they have,
But-
they have their own deed restrictions for development
What's-
guidelines.
What's gonna take precedent is the development ordinances that are in effect. on the-
And-
Okay.
And they don't
So
have the zoning.
of it is separate from the actual. development.
So we can change the zoning and still be able to get their fences.
And you think about it, if we sold the property, you're probably looking at 60 to 90 days minimum, and then you've got the planning process, you've got the engineering process, the plan review process, so you're talking a good, probably 6 months before you even see somebody applying for a permit.
that's true. I just want to caution the council that there is a risk, but then if I were wanting to develop under the current rule,
That's
I
why
would quickly turn in something, because then vested rights would apply, and then we'd have to.
That's what I would ask.
And that discussion was whether to rezone or not, or whether to make some concessions of the residential that was next to it. And that was never really, it was all tabled, but that was the discussion. And so by rezoning-
Isn't there still a 20-foot buffer between residential and light commercial?
There was an offer back and forth to buy part of the land. There was a discussion of selling part of this piece of property and not the other piece of the property. There were a lot of things discussed that night. So it wasn't, the rezoning was the issue, whether to rezone it or not, or rezone part of it. That was discussed too. So it's the 20-foot buffer. I don't know how far, if we even got that far talking about the residential, did we? I have to go back and look at the minutes, listen to the audio about how far that buffer was going to go in, if it was going to be more or less, or if it was going to be wooded, or if there's going to be a certain fence on it, that sort of thing. So just to approve the rezoning as it is now is basically telling the residents, you're out of luck. So we're going to rezone it business and put the warehouses in. Because that's what's going in is warehouses, right?
That's what would be. proposed.
Right, and so if putting warehouses next to a residential.
Yes.
Right, because you said lot 3 was not good. The other one y'all own because of the pipelines.
No, lot one is a clean site that we own. Lot 2, we do not own, that's actually also on lot 3. we own. So both of those would be most likely industrial.
Okay, all right, those are just comments. We're going to move on to the next item. Any other comments on amending the code of ordinance regarding development standards for Nathan, direction to Nathan? Okay, next item is resources for brush disposal.
Good evening, Council. Drew Huffman, Public Works Director. So this was a topic brought up by Councilmember Stoll for residential brush and green waste options. So we went through and we looked at what's currently offered with GFL, what's currently offered with Harris County, what it would take for us to run a brush and green waste program. And so right here you see we do have currently with GFL So with GFL, they are residents and are people that use our GFL through Tomball. They currently have brush service. With that, you can have the bundle sticks can't be, or limbs can't be more than 4 inches. Bundle can't weigh more than 60 to 80 pounds. It has to be a certain size and bundled together. They do pick that up, and our residents do currently pay for that. Harris County Precinct 4, so right over here on Service Center Drive, right off 249, over next to the Harris County Precinct 4's office. They do have a really nice site there that you can take anything from trash to brush. You bring it to them. The only thing they don't take is electronics, so TVs, refrigerators, those sorts of items. And it is open Monday through Saturday, and 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and awesome staff. I went out there and met them. They do great, and they get lots of brush brought to them by our residents currently and other people that live outside of Tomball. So, and then the third one would be us running a program. And so we would pick this up during the week, 1 time a week. And obviously our limbs couldn't be exceeded 6 inches in diameter and 8 foot in length. So communication for our green waste, we can do a better job of this. So this is put in with the bill. GFL, if you look on their website, they talk all about, what you can put out when they pick it up. But we can do a better job of pushing that information to our residents through messages in the utility bills, our website, our social media, and promotions and ads for special events, especially with our spring cleanup that's coming up next year. So this would be the cost of what it would be for us to run a program. So we're looking at hiring 3 new employees, operations site. The primary site would be the old landfill, so we would have to modify space for that out there. And then the initial cost would be around $425,000, and the estimated ongoing cost would be around $275,000.
When you say a load, does it matter how big the load is?
He'd pick up or small trailer load, so 16 foot. Yes, sir. So they have plenty of, I think there were 4 roll-offs for brush, and I believe there were 4 to 6 roll-offs.
So you just
for
put it in
trash.
roll off, because I didn't even know.
Yes, sir. Put it in the roll-off right over here on Service Center Drive.
Can you go back to the 3 choices? Okay. Any discussion, questions?
I mean, I asked for this to be discussed, and not just for tree limbs, things like that. I get asked quite often throughout the year, people have things that they want to recycle that they don't want to just wait for the spring week deal, or they miss it because they're out of town that weekend and they have things that they would like to dispose of. And, where, people are just wanting to know where they can go drop these things off, because they do want to recycle it. They don't want to just throw it in the trash. With tree limbs, again, people, trim trees and that throughout the year. And, I understand our waste service company will take it as long as you tie it up and everything else. But a lot of times after they get done trimming a bunch of trees and that, they got a pretty good sized stack. And they're just wanting to know if they can take it somewhere. If they have a pickup truck or a trailer,
Yes, sir.
just take it and drop it off.
So that
You know.
best location, would be the Precinct 4 location on Service Center Drive for right now.
I mean, I know where I came from in Ohio. The old city landfill, what they did there was they converted it where they took a retiree from the city who wanted to do it. They were open on Saturday mornings. And the retiree worked it, and basically just people could come through till noon, 2 o'clock, drop off recyclables, even tree limbs, things like that. And if they had a bunch of tree limbs, they just let them build up, and then somebody would come out with a chipper throughout the week, a city staff employee. And then they just chip it right there on site and build a mound. And eventually that would turn into mulch, where they would basically sell the mulch to people
who would want to come and pick it up. So, I'm just trying to think of a way that we can help our citizens who want to recycle to be able to do things like this, especially with the tree limbs or foliage, things like that, where they have a place to dispose of it instead of having to tie it up and everything else, because if they get a bunch of tree limbs, it's a bunch of work.
Yes, sir, I understand.
You say recyclables, other than tree limbs, are you talking like old computers and stuff like
Old
that?
computers,
Old printers,
old printers.
you
I
know, we
mean-
have that once a year or twice a year when they come. take that
We,
stuff
we
out?
have it once a year over at the college, but if somebody misses it, then they're holding on to it. And I can tell you what happens with the stuff. It goes right out to the curb. Because I see it.
Yeah, there are 2 or 3 other organizations that do that too, once a year.
Mhm.
So there's usually there's opportunity for 3 times a year to take electronics and stuff.
But I mean, even if there aren't places around, if we could get it published on our website where people can learn where these.
We can do that
places
too.
are.
There's other locations in Harris County. Obviously, I wanted to pick out the locations that were closest to us. But precinct 2 has a location for electronics. And precinct 3 has a location for household waste like used motor oil, excess cleaning supplies. So we can put those on our website also.
Yeah, and I mean, even just like used motor oil, I know AutoZone and places like that will take it. And just getting things like that put out there where people
Okay.
know where they can take things like that.
Same thing with used paint, usually Sherwin-Williams or somebody will take it back and recycle.
They were.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I didn't know
I mean, all I know is when I was at my house in Colorado, I took 11 gallons of used paint down to Sherwin-Williams. They said, bring it in.
Huh.
They took it and recycled it. Now, we probably ought to call and ask them if that was
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, because you have places like that that'll take old paints like that, mix them together, make black. And you'd be
I think that's
surprised if
what
it
they
gets
did.
used.
They make black out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there any discussions from the audience that'd like to come speak about this? Any opinions? Okay,
I think my dad to that, we've talked through once before about this, I have 2 restaurants in town. I have dumpsters picked up 4 days a week. 95, maybe 98% of what's in the dumpster is cardboard boxes. And every restaurant's like that. And I've been looking for a way. We flatten them and stack them, and if we can get them picked up, it'd save a lot of dumpster pickups and save a lot of cardboard. I mean, it's incredible how much cardboard is going.
We bail ours up and sell. it. We have a baler with those cardboard.
Yeah, but not a lot of businesses can afford a baler like that. But, if there's businesses such as yours that would take it and you sell it and make the money.
No, we don't make any money. It's a loser, but we don't have all that cardboard in the containers. You don't have to come out and get the containers 4 times a week. They come once a week. And we got 100,000 square foot building. And we use a lot for cardboard. But we bail it off of them. They're not too bad. And especially if you had a couple people around at other restaurants, when we could all go together and if I want to put it centrally and put that in there, it's easy. The bail, you just throw it in, hit a button and it squeezes it up.
Restaurants margins usually can't afford things like this.
I have started the conversation with recycling with GFL. So they're looking at options right now on kind of what it would be like to expand the recycle opportunities that we have, what they offer and what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I know the school district used to have recycled for paper and cardboard bins over at the junior high by where I live. Then they got rid of them because of the mess and that started forming. I don't blame them for getting rid of them and that. But I mean, people are just looking for places to go drop things off. And around town, we don't have them. Or people don't know where to take them.
Okay. We could do a better job of putting that information out.
is it possible, instead of including it in everyone's monthly cost on this, that the people who need it, just GFL will give us, we'll make the run for $20 or something, whatever the cost is.
It's 400.
Hmm?
Rent one of those deals is over
Well-
$400.
I mean, GFL coming to pick up the cardboard.
Oh,
And
Well,
ban it and
that's
just
why
charge the person.
I've just started the initial conversations on what a program like that would look like. And that's as far as we've gotten. So
Okay, so it's not everybody who's paying it who wouldn't use it.
Right.
It would be the people who would use that service
yes, ma'am.
for a lot of cardboard. I'm just asking.
No, right, I'm trying to think of how our contract is structured right now, and I think. I don't remember, we'll check, see how
We'll check out.
structured.
Okay. Any other direction for Drew? Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, third item on workshop is the 2920 public hearing update and review, meeting for the road. Jessica,
So I have to drive and speak, so forgive me.
first is the date, December 6th, right?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so just for anyone who hasn't heard of the 2920 project, the project entails the reconstruction of 2920 from State Highway 249 to Willow Street. It does, of course, include the reconstruction of the roadway and utilities, safety improvements, aesthetic enhancements, upgraded signals, lighting, landscaping, those sorts of things. Everyone can think back to where they were in 2007 because that's when this project began, when HGAC initiated the access management study for FM 2920 from State Highway 290 to I-45. Just as a recap, this project has been sort of thought of and taken many different kind of routes. First with the access management study, then onto the Livable Centers downtown plan that led to some interim improvements in downtown Tomball. It has and continues to be adopted as part of HGAC's transportation improvement program. You can kind of see the history of that over time. Back in 2015 was the first time that it appeared, and that's when the city applied for the grant and received the $28 million grant for the reconstruction of that segment. And at that time, the city committed $3 million towards the project. Kind of jump forward to 2021 and 2022. In the most recent transportation improvement programs, the 21-24 and 23-26, the project was moved to a set construction start date of 2023. And that's what initiated the city and TxDOT kind of talking about how do we move this project forward to reconstruction. If you'll remember, we held a community meeting back in March of 2022, where we talked about the project and reintroduced the project to the community. Subsequent to that, we got a lot of feedback. And so we went into a contract with Gunda to consider design alternatives for the 4-block Old Town section, as well as TxDOT completed an updated traffic study and crash analysis. And so all of that to get you where we are today, which is that we've moved forward with discussions on the advanced funding agreements, which, as you know, are what set who's responsible for which parts of the project. I guess I covered the slide already, but moving forward again. So where we are today, we've scheduled a public meeting and a second public meeting based on the feedback we received in March and the design alternatives for December 6th. This will be an open come and go style event to get feedback on those design alternatives. We have a proposed professional service agreement, not a public service announcement, but we'll have one of those too, with Gunda or Ardura to prepare for that community meeting, tentatively scheduled for the November 7th city council meeting. With that community meeting, our goal would be to have feedback solicited on the design alternatives through in-person attendees, as well as providing online options for those who can't attend. And then with that, a full report of that feedback will be delivered to City Council. So setting the stage for where we need to go in the future would be moving towards getting council direction on those design alternatives. So once we've collected and analyzed that feedback in early 2023, of course, that would hopefully lead to the execution of the AFAs and then future the selection and contract with the project engineer. In terms of the communication plan, really, it's November 1st, which shocked me when I woke up this morning, but that means we're going to start messaging and getting the word out about this. We are working to update the project webpage, which is hosted on the city's website right now. That provides a little bit of history and information, and then focusing on social media. We did direct mail on the last public meeting to all property owners on 2920, as well as 1 block north and south, and then providing messaging in the next utility bills that should be hitting mailboxes sort of mid to late November. Knowing that people might be out of town with Thanksgiving, we kind of want to hit as many options as we possibly can. And so with that, I will happily take any questions on this project.
Would you expand on the there's 3 different choices, and you're going to have the long map so people can look and see exactly, oh, here's my building. This is what's proposed in front of it. This is what the issue is. Is that still the plan? And they will be manned, these 6 tables. Is that right? 3. So we just need 1 set of maps also for each alternative.
Three sets. Three sections.
And I believe we're going to
Six
also
or
have
nine.
a presentation like recorded, right? So that if you can't attend in person, you can- yeah.
All right.
So if you can't be there in person, knowing that it's one day, we're going to record the presentation with the options. There'll be digital, virtual ways to participate as well. We know it's sometimes hard around the holidays to get everyone in one place, so.
So they'll be able to come and look and see exactly what is under each of the 3 proposals, what is happening to the road and their building, and how much of it's going to be taken and how much not's going to be taken under each of the 3 proposals. And then be able to give feedback and vote on which is their first. Is that how we're going to do it?
We're going to ask them to select which design alternative they prefer.
Right.
Maybe not, we won't use the word favorite, but they're preferred.
Preferred. Preferred. Okay. Good. And then that is what we go to TxDOT with. Correct?
It's, we'll report back what we heard from the public to council, and it will be council's
Okay.
decision.
And an AFA is,
Advanced funding agreement.
thank you. Okay. Any questions on that? Any questions or anything else you want to see at this meeting or ask at this meeting?
Since I don't even know what those 3 look like, I don't know how I would ask a question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you wanna offer some ideas about what the 3 are gonna
Because
be
I
like?
like Mark's idea on the one-way streets. So,
Yeah, I believe,
Kyle, would you
I don't
like-
know if we want to do a. We don't have the visuals, but.
The focal area is 4 blocks of downtown. Okay, you've got the option that still has the raised median. Okay, it's kind of a phase or a core. With the introduction, the feedback we got, we need a left turn. It helps. Okay, what was presented in the first public meeting, got that access off. So. Base alternative, if you will, will still have a raised median in those 4 blocks. Those 4 blocks only, with the exception of business 249. Okay. One of the options is to maintain the continuous left turn lane through that area, but introduce a one-way pair at the non-signalized location. Okay. And the third is kind of a combo. So you've got a shorter median that achieves the same thing, which is to cut off the left turn movements and through movements at the unsignalized. So 2 of the intersections would be cut off with a shorter kind of median. But that retains the 2-way traffic on the side.
They're also going to be alternatives up toward the railroad track on Elm.
The railroads, we're going to introduce probably a hooded, what they call a hooded left turn on either side of the railroad. Okay. Regardless of which option you pick. And that's primarily to disallow left turn movements that would cause a backup in traffic over the railroad. Okay, you're safe.
What is a hooded? I don't know what that is.
That's, so if you're westbound and you want to turn left, you can turn left, okay? If you're eastbound, then you can't turn left. It's one directional through the island. Oh,
So you still cross traffic then?
it still allows a left turn. Okay, so if you're eastbound, you'll be able to turn left, northbound on Elm
That's what we see a lot down 2920 towards
Street. TxDOT.
Kirkendall.
They do a combination. They're putting in what they call hooded vests on 2920.
Yes, in the, where they're adding them on the Kirkendall section, there are hooded lefts.
Then they get in areas where you see more of the traditional full opening, left turn. From both directions. Thank you.
Is it possible to add on these definitions on these? If they wanted, people want, are visual usually. And if they want to see what does that look like, there's one at the intersection of Kirkendall and whatever that road is. Just to direct people actually what it will look like. Great.
We'll have the full
Thank you.
visuals. I know Kyle's team is still working on
Okay.
finalizing and getting everything on.
But
an
actual
alternative,
photos,
so.
yeah, that would be good,
Mhm.
actual photos where this has already been used, so people understand.
Drafts.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at the same time, below those illustrations,
Mhm.
we'll have pros and cons, kind of like the top.
Right.
Okay. If you do this, then here's the pro, here's the con.
Mhm.
All three of them meet the safety objective. That the access management side of the time. Okay.
It's the compromise of TxDOT. It reaches their safety objective on either, any of these three.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, Scott?
So I got invited to look at the plans for the alleys, which to me in the Fort Black area of Old Town is a part of this puzzle.
Mhm.
What the vision is for the alleys. And that's gonna, project's gonna start soon. Question is, has the public got to see what the plan for the alleys is? And get feedback or input? I like what I saw. And I think it maybe lessens some of the shock of what's gonna take place by painting a bigger vision, what Old Town's gonna look like. So I'm just wondering if it makes sense to get the public involved and get a view of what's coming for the alleys, because I thought it was pretty cool.
That's a good idea.
What we have done so far is met with individual property owners and those that have more intensive uses within those three alleys. So we've met with Hudson several times, we've met with Main Street Crossing, we've met with several different business owners, including Scott. And really, we're trying to kind of identify, one, are there major issues, red flags on what's being conceptualized before we take it to the public? Are there areas where we could make changes on central locations, polycarbs, those type of things? That's what we've been trying to flush out with the individual property owners and businesses before we go through a public meeting process. I think we've got 1 or 2 meetings left. And then what we're hoping to do is bring, I think, kind of that overall package to council and then have a public meeting.
Can we have a workshop? Can we have a preliminary workshop to see what's going on with council?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I think,
That's
like I said, we're got 1 or 2 meetings left.
Mhm.
And what we want to present to you is something that's not a surprise, right, to some of these property owners, especially if it shows this being a potential different type of use, or, maybe this being a location for a dumpster or something like that. So that's what we've been trying to do, is flush out all that, so that it's not a huge surprise to anybody that may see that. So that's what we are, we're looking at early.
Mhm.
You better be on hold for it.
Yeah. And this is for both sides, alleys on both sides of Main, correct?
So the north and south 100 block, and then the north.
Okay, but not the south.
And if you'll remember when we talked about the alleys, our goal was to get the alleys construction and improvements in anticipation of the 2920 project, so that when a business was going to lose their maybe front access during the 2920 construction, that they would have a much nicer entrance on the rear through the alleys. So that would be an improved facility for them.
That would be good because we're getting inquiries about restroom facilities on the other side across from Cherry Street and Teets next to Cisco. And having a workshop would be able people to answer those questions.
And
What's
we've
going
worked, with the landscape architect on, to make sure that we can include, hopefully, a restroom facility at that street.
Right.
So those are being incorporated.
Okay. Okay, so we'll have a workshop this year or,
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
okay,
And
Good.
it probably can be on the regular agenda.
Regular.
It is just the presentation.
with the public being able to ask a lot of questions. Good, good. Good. Thank you, Scott, for bringing that up.
I mean, if you see the whole picture, maybe it's easy for people to accept what's going on.
Yeah, we haven't seen the picture, council hasn't, so that would be good. Is the workshop going to be before or after the text dot hearing? I mean, text dot public meeting.
Depending on their two last meetings, and then we can present to council. It would be nice to combine them together on the December 6th, but if we need to do another one, we can.
If we could shoot
Yeah.
for November 21st as a possible presentation to council, then possibly one
There
of
you go.
those stations, one of those tables.
Right.
We did talk about having information
Awesome.
there at the December 6th, even if we weren't ready, but having a tape, like a small table that said what's going on with the alleys, just so people would understand that there's competing projects happening in a very close proximity, and we're doing what we can to, improve one facility when we know another's gonna be kind of
Great.
constructed.
That sounds good. Sounds good. Any questions, comments?
Is there any, what options are we being presented at Four Corners where we have that turn
I
lane?
don't believe there are different options.
They're wanting to
for
get
Four
rid of
Corners.
that, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, that was not a point of contention. So the slip right,
Mhm.
it's still planning on taking that.
Okay.
But adding a right-hand turn
What's that?
with storage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then there's
It's
going
fine.
to be,
Lane,
oh, I'm sorry. Go
It's
ahead.
kind of a- crazy lane.
And then Alma, is that Alma's going to be cut off? Is that the funny road that comes in to right after Four Corners? Across from the funeral home? But I think that's gonna become a one-way. You're not gonna be able to cross over both,
No, I think it
all the
is.
lanes of highways.
I think there's no change.
I think the only change is there's one driveway that has to be.
The original then did anticipate that, and
Yes.
that stoplight is with the full service station. is.
Right,
And because of that light and the configuration of how that got developed, I think what the ultimate decision was or suggestion was not to close off Palmer. Because it
Okay.
didn't make sense for an intersection, it's such a kind of a wonky angle.
okay.
And so I don't.
But there's
think
no
that-
stop sign there. I mean, stoplight there.
It goes right into
If you go
there.
right into it, so you gotta pull out in front of people. That's to me is
Yeah, it's a mess.
very dangerous.
That's more dangerous. than the other.
Right out.
So you can't go across and turn left?
Okay,
Okay.
that's what I was
talking
asking. Okay. Thank you. All right, now we go in, the question is, do y'all want to go in to consider the rezoning at this time? Or do you want to wait for information on that would affect it?
Well, my only question is if it turns out to be a fence there, can't that be part of the development agreement?
If the council direction is for the development standards to be updated to include or to require a solid fence between the two uses, and that's going to become effect via ordinance, then I don't think we would have a problem putting that into the deed restrictions for that site. The challenge is going to come in the fact that it's a additional requirement placed on a property that is adjacent to property that has not had that requirement for a long time. And it does become a bit of a challenge. We've looked at that on the rear of our lots. Our deed restrictions do allow where it's adjacent to a single family residential for, it does allow on the rear where it's not visible from a public right of way to have chain link with the vinyl coat slats. And a lot of discussion was had at that time about requiring a solid wall. You know, how do we buffer? What does that look like? And because of the future land use map showing all of that as light industrial, that was really the direction of, we don't want to require a solid structure there. Because if that whole area transitions into light industrial, it's requiring somebody to put in a lot of money for something that's probably going to be moved at some point.
Okay, so the question is, do we consider on with this zoning request, the public hearing, the first reading? the
You did
voting?
have the public hearing on October the 17th. And you did have the first reading of the ordinance by caption only on October 17th.
Okay, so skip this portion right here.
Yeah, it's not necessary to hold a public hearing. We've been informed, read the ordinance by caption on first reading.
We can go straight to consider the ordinance.
Okay, so we have had the public hearing and we have had a motion to read by caption only.
It carried unanimously and the caption was read.
Okay, so we will entertain a motion on this and or take no action. So based on what we discussed tonight on the development agreement and also the differences between the residential. When we ended this and took no action, it was deciding on citizens' residential request versus developers changing the zoning in order to get more money on the sale. So, and put the warehouses there. So do we need more discussion on that? It was a dilemma between residential, citizen, and commercial. Councilman Townsend said it more eloquently than I did, but he's not here tonight. So do we still want to discuss this some more or take no action on this? Or do we want to bring it to a vote?
I'm open for discussion.
Or discussion? Okay, so we would take no action on this item?
Discuss and possible action.
Okay. Any other?
So you'll need a motion and a second regarding approval, and then you can enter into discussion.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a consensus. We have go for discussion and possible action, or do we take no action and table this till the next city council meeting?
I'm good with discussion and possible action. My only question is this. I'm unclear about timing and if we're gonna mull this over some more and a couple of more meetings go by, where do we stand in terms of the urgency and how that's balanced?
The urgency of the person who wants to buy it
Of
going
her
away
possible offer on that property.
versus the resident who lives next to it.
Yeah, I think we have options to protect the resident that we need to discuss, and so I think
Okay.
that has to be.
So if we do any changes to the zoning ordinance, it has to go to P and Z. So minimum, if we knew the answer, what we wanted to change is, so it's about 2 months. If we had what we needed to change right now.
Okay.
Because that process of scheduling.
Do my best Nathan impression, but we
Okay.
would have to notice it, so it would have to be published as well as go to P and Z. And at this point, the December P and Z meeting would be the first time
Okay.
that discussion, and then it would have to come to city council. So the earliest city council would see it for first reading would be the second December meeting. So it would be the first meeting in January that you could even consider it for approval at the absolute earliest.
Council can make a move, can make a motion to adopt in a second, and then you can discuss it, and you can still decide to take no action. following the discussion. The motion to approve or to adopt the ordinance does not require that you actually take the vote, but you have to make the motion and second in order to discuss.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adopt on the first reading ordinance number 2022-38. An ordinance of the city of Tomball amending chapter 50 of the Tomball Code of Ordinances of a 17-acre piece of land, lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Tomball Business and Technology Park from single-family residence to light industrial. The property is located within the 1900 block of Persimmon Street and east and west sides, providing for severability, providing for a penalty of an amount not to exceed 2,000 for each day of violation of any provision thereof, making findings of fact and providing for other related matters.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Is there anyone who would like to come and speak from the audience? Okay, Chad, you were second, I'm sorry.
This is council.
We get first this time.
Okay, then go ahead. He had his hand up first, Paul did. Okay,
And is it Ladeka? Okay, well, mine's Dag, so that gets worked over pretty good. Anyway, I had a good chance to meet you. I'm on the EDC board. I've been for over that.
need your name and address, please.
Chad Deggs, 29602 Imperial Creek Drive, Tomball, Texas. I just wanted to come here and represent the board members, and I've had I've been involved with this since it all started, really, which was the idea that we're going to extend Persimmon and tie in the business park, right? Way back in 2014, we were probably talking about this, I think. And the connector property was highly encumbered, complex, multi-owner. And so our first goal, and this was probably just looking at my notes, maybe 2015, was really secure the property and put the connector in. And that jived with the comprehensive plan, which was commercial on the west side, I think, back then of Persimmon. But the idea was that this was going to move in this direction. That came from, we redid the comprehensive plan in 2019, and there were a lot of people involved. Most everybody in this room, I would say, was related, involved to some extent on the comprehensive plan. We had the advisory, 12 people on CPAC, 6 meetings, online surveys. We had open houses where all of this was laid out. It was, not an EDC thing. It was a, City of Tomball thing. And it was, and I'm not speaking on behalf of that process, but what came out of it was Persimmon, that direction was going to move and transition to commercial over time, just based on the usage and what was, with the cut through. And then when Persimmon came through, it became very clear. I mean, it's a different look than it used to be, that dead end road. So once we had the property, it took us about 4 years to fix this property. I mean, that's how complex it was. What we ended up with was 2 lots, and you guys know this story. We kind of horse traded with Tortuga. There's no money changing hands, but we ended up fixing a lot of the lines that were coming under the road and right of ways and moving oil and gas. And there were 2 oil and gas companies involved. So we got to that. We ended up with 2 lots that are what the EDC sees as adjacent, contiguous, and kind of a natural extension to the business park and that direction. And I would say, fortunately, we don't have any hard neighbors on any, right next to the property. Can I call you Paul? I'm sorry. I don't want to, I've practiced your name 3 times sitting there, but we don't have a situation where Paul's house is, right on the property line, which I think is a really a different question for city council than maybe what we have here. So I think we have from Paul's house down to this property about 800 feet. I just kind of ballparked it. You might know better. But the board feels like that's a reasonably big buffer to kind of answer the question of the day, which is this property. And I know that's debatable and that's for you guys to decide. I think it's a different question if, say, the property to the north of him wanted to go commercial today and his house was, 70, 80 feet from a tilt wall. I think that would be a different question than what we have today. If we take the natural buffer and we say, hey, that's the limit, well, then on EDC, I have to take a radius of 800 feet and draw it around Paul's house. And basically anything that encroaches on that, which would include north of medical complex, would probably reach, it would reach the east there. We're looking at a buffer as if it's a straight line, but I'm going to take it and draw a line around it, right? So is this buffer sufficient to answer the question of the day? I think the EDC would say there's a case to be made for it. Let's put it that way. Being that it is a natural move north that matches the comprehensive plan. Ultimately, it's for y'all to decide, right? But as far as a board member and speaking for the board, we feel like it's kind of a natural extension. And I can answer any questions you have, including the sequence purchase offers, counter offers that you might have. I took a few notes and I was involved in all of those at the time. So if I get it wrong, Kelly can help me. But with that, I'll hand it over to you guys. Do you have any questions for, I'm kind of representing the EDC board today.
Do we know what kind of building is being proposed?
I'll just say, so the offer is from Chuck Nixon, who has developed the other properties in the cul-de-sac, so it would be identical. It'd be a 25,000 square foot office warehouse, single user building, identical to what's in the park on the cul-de-sac.
Tilt wall?
Has to be. They have to
Okay.
follow our deed restrictions on the property are gonna be the same
Yeah,
as for the park.
got it.
So you can't put a tilt wall metal building up there.
Yeah.
It has to be tilt wall concrete, 3 kinds of materials, has to follow along with our deed restrictions in the park. Because we don't want something that doesn't match the park.
Just wanted that out there.
How tall would the building be?
We have a maximum on the, was it 28 or 25?
25 or 28.
Yeah, this might be 30 feet. I mean,
Okay.
in light industrial, we have a maximum of 70 feet high. I don't think we're gonna ever get that because of our restrictions. That's why JDR cables are just outside of the park.
Oh.
So
Okay.
his buildings are about 30, 35 feet. I think he's got 28 foot. Frame, I think it's 28 foot, but I don't think the overall height is.
Are all our heights roughly that, as it turns out?
Yes.
Okay, so that'd be a good representation for sure.
Does TDC have any compromise to block the view of these warehouses from residential?
If I can, touch on the fence, and Paul, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but are you, do you want your property to remain residential and Persimmon to remain residential, or is it more of fencing during the transition? And I don't know if you even know that answer, but I thought I would ask.
Not so naive as to think that I'm gonna stop development on Persimmon. And especially across the street where you got the railroad over there. I don't see that property being a place where people would want to come in and build homes on 5 or 6 acre lots like there are out there, or 10 acre lots. So, no, I don't see that. I don't see myself trying to stand in the way of what looks like a natural process.
Okay. And what about, you mentioned fencing, and I cringe at fencing because I can't believe how expensive it is. I mean, just a cedar fence is, I'm trying to get one now, but one of the things that concerns me is we leave here, we say, oh, we talk about a fence, and then it's not satisfactory to you because of the cost. I mean, these things are really expensive. I don't know if anybody in the room has,
$7.
I bet you it's way more than that. Really? What type?
6-foot tall cedar.
We're talking about the fence he wants.
I know,
Right.
now that.
That's a hundred.
Concrete thing, slide in.
Hundreds a foot.
Well, he probably knows exactly.
Well, are you through, Chad?
8-foot cinder block fence.
Mhm.
Before you dress it up, it's gonna be roughly $100.
100 foot.
Yeah, and so for the 400-foot on the piece of property, so now you're looking at somewhere around $45,000.
Okay,
Okay.
that's all I had. Any other questions?
No, you can continue on.
Oh.
I would just
Yeah, I
want to
got
have him
you.
come up and talk also. If
Is
there's
the-
any questions.
Okay, is the
Mr.
plan
Davis?
to take all the way to medical complex someday or what?
Well, the comprehensive plan points us in that direction. And so it's going to present some really hard questions for y'all to answer as this unfolds. I mean, I think even Paul, you know, who knows the property better than anybody, sees there's a natural progression coming. And that's what we saw from the community that came out and looked at all this property, that they felt like going that direction. And I'd be curious of John's opinion on it
That's me
too. But it's not necessarily our plan. I mean, we're here to facilitate it. I think it would be, I think it'd be difficult for me to stand here and bring a tilt wall proposal to the north of Paul. You know, I would have a hard time saying this area is ready for that. You know, I mean, that would be, you know, pretty tough to even request, but that's why I'm making a distinction on this property, which I think is contiguous, which makes it, at least a case can be made either way for you guys to decide, is the way we see it on the board.
And your decision is gonna be, is 800 or 1,000 feet from his house to our property? Is that enough buffer? Is 500 feet enough? Is 1,500 feet what we need? Where are you gonna get that in Tomball?
Yeah, do you want to come up and speak? Are you done?
I'm done if y'all are done.
Okay.
No, I'm done.
No, you talked. You
No.
gotta come up.
Come on up and say your name and address, and if you have a question, and then we will hear from Paul.
William Sumner, 12321 Zion Road, Tomball. And I've been a member of DDC for, gosh, I don't know, 12, 15 years. So yeah, that was my question, was how much of a buffer is enough? Is that we looked at Google Earth and we guessed at about 1,000 feet from this house to the start of our property. So how much is enough? Where are you gonna build anything in Tomball that you can get 1,000-foot buffer? But between them, I mean, that's what you have to decide. And, you know, I look at what we've done in the past. The council put a venue 50 yards from my house. Okay, 50 yards from Dane's house, 50 yards from Rodney's house, 100 yards from Paul Garcia. We all came and complained. They still passed and put the venue in. We have one citizen, and I understand because I've got 23 acres with the venue next to me. But it's not 1,000 feet away. If it was, I'd be happy. So where you pass that 50 yards away, now we've got, that's 75 feet. He's got 1,000 feet. How much is enough? And there's only one of all the people in the purple area up there, there's only one person here complaining, which is Paul. I'm sorry with your name, but yes, so I understand where he's coming from, but you gotta look at what's good for the city. Question?
Thank you. Okay, Paul? Come up and state your name and address.
I'm Paul Mladenka, and I live at 1631 South Persimmon. And, you know, the 800,000-foot buffer, you know, it cost me a lot of money. And that when we bought that property, you know, we've got 5 kids, we got grandkids. And when we bought the property, we didn't think, we were gonna, business was gonna cave in on us. So, but it did. Now it's clear, you don't start, our thoughts have changed. We see what's happening around us. And it's unlikely now that we're gonna build a home on that acreage that's gonna join yours. That's starting to look less and less appealing. I'm to the point now where I'm just, trying to hunker down and, hope that we get something, acceptable that, we can live with. And thank God we have 800 foot. And I can't hardly imagine what's going to happen when the property to the north of, I hope that we're talking about that too, because that in fact is, within a rock's throw. And so again, I can't imagine standing in the way of people doing what they want with their property. I had interest in buying it just to give us that little buffer there. That's all it was. And I figured, yeah, it'd probably be a good investment. But now that's out, and we're down to trying to hang on and hopefully have something between us that live with good neighbors. And as far as I sure would like something get decided before we change its zoning, because I don't understand deed restrictions, or who's going to pay for the fence, or whose property it's going to be on, or who's going to be in control of the fence. I don't know how you work out all those details, but I know this, last year, you guys came back with a counter offer of $360,000 for that property. And I'm told now it's the going rate's $460,000. Well, I'll tell you what, if you wait another 6 months, it might be $500,000. So I don't know. I don't see the big rush in making something happen out here, especially if you wanted to apply, all over the town. And as far as, thank God I'm 800 foot, I got a good buffer. You're right. But now, if I wanted to build a home over there, those, whoever lived there wouldn't have such a good buffer. And, our property's still tied up with Tortuga over there. That's what happened with them. I'm in the oil and gas. I'll tell you right now, with the Tortuga deal, the lines you got going under Persimmon will never see a drop of hydrocarbon. I don't know what, anyway, that's a whole different subject. But I want to do something right and be, the council feel like that the decision they made was, all right, we can go forward with this. And, it's spelled out, and you don't do something to hurry a sale along and then find out that, the mechanism isn't in place to, protect your citizens. And I hate being the victim again. I've already been run over once with an oil well in my backyard that I'm having to live with now. So, these decisions go on and on. And I appreciate the effort y'all are putting forth.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Brenda Bladenka. I live at 1631 South Persimmon, and I'm going to try to hold myself together on this. I'm hearing all this land being built, big buildings. We don't have a lot of money. All that y'all see, that y'all drive by, it come from here, and it come from here, and it come from here. We don't hire people. We do it ourselves, and you know this. We worked, and we built that ourselves. We did it for our 5 children, their husbands, and 8 grandchildren. All we asking before you make a decision is consider, I've got arthritis now. I got back problems, all because I have dug holes with post hole diggers to make sure that man right there don't have to do it by himself. Our money does not pay for people to do the hard labor. We do it. So please just consider We thought about moving a long time ago when we thought this was all coming up. But when you sit down as a person and you look at your place and you see these big boulder rocks that I and him placed for just a decoration, we can't leave it. We can't afford a place like that, that we built with our hands and our muscles. We can't afford to go buy another place like that. So I'm not moving. Matter of fact, we built a pool. So I know I'm not moving. I've worked 10 years on him to get a pool. I'm not moving. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I do have a question. A TDC, I know you talked about the buffer going this way, but what about the buffer going this way? Which is $40,000 fence. And with the increase from if this was rezoned, why can't TDC take part of that profit from the rezoning to satisfy a landowner?
Because the reason why it went from 360 to 460 was because of the money we spent to get the property to where we could move the lines and everything else. We've already spent the money. So that you're saying, oh, we made a profit. We haven't made anything because we haven't sold anything. But the reason why that property went up was to cover the expense of what we had to do to move all those lines, get them over on the other property. That's why it went up.
Yeah, but y'all knew that going into the property that there was gonna be Tortuga, pardon my French, but extortion money. It was just extortion land.
Actually, we didn't pay
And
for
so-
anything.
No, you gave
Not
the
a dime.
land.
We made a trade with them.
Yeah, so that's the
But we
same
had to
thing.
move the lines.
But that was my, so you're saying that none of the money that you would want to give, that you, in selling this property to the developer of these, you would be willing to compromise and build whatever aerial buffer, height buffer would be satisfied on this property? I guess that's one of the questions I'm asking.
Again, I come back to, is 1,000 feet enough buffer?
No, we're talking about going
No,
on.
I'm talking about 1,000 feet from his house.
No.
Is that enough buffer?
I'm talking about
So
the fence.
if you're doing this here, it's for the rest of Pownell. Okay, are you gonna be able to give everybody 1,000 feet?
That wasn't my question, but
Well,
Thank you very
you're
much.
talking about the height of the wall.
I'm talking about the fence, the height of the fence.
My question on that would be, okay, we do it on this property. Are we willing to do it on any other property in Tomball?
I'm talking about a compromise between the commercial
No,
and the
once you set
landowner.
that precedent, we set a precedent. So are we willing to do that throughout the rest of Tomball?
It would have to come from TEDC on part of their purchase agreements. So,
Well,
on
but the
rezoning.
TEDC does not own everything in town. I'm saying, if we do it on this, are we willing to do it on, are we going to require it from everybody else? In Tomball?
I mean, let's
That-
take
I mean-
that answers my
John's
question.
property is up on Persimmon. Let's say he decides he wants to sell it. And he does, are you gonna put a wall up there?
Bill, come on up to the microphone and, yep. So you gotta run the meeting according to.
Well, already said.
Okay.
Yep.
All right,
I mean, let me say this, I mean. The purpose of the EDC is to develop commercial land. It's not residential. That's not their charter. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken by state law, they can't do anything residentially. Is that correct, Kelly? So, I mean, Mayor, you served on the EDC probably back when all this was happening. What did you think was going to happen on this back when you were on the EDC?
I don't know when we bought it. This was going to be to Persimmon because it was pretty cheap land back then. And it was going to be part of extension of the business park back then.
Okay,
Yeah, that was, I don't know, 14, 15, no, that was.
but did
I
any
don't
of this
remember.
start with redoing the land and the pipelines and everything while you were on the EDC?
I don't remember that. I remember saying, before you buy this land, clear those surface rights with Tortuga. I remember saying that, and that was not done. And I talked to Tom Condon about that. This land has pipelines. We fought them for 10 years on the 249 road. I know what it is to fight Tortuga and Americo. And I said, don't buy this land unless you make sure you have surface rights. And I remember saying that. Shortly after that, I got off of P and Z and then talking to Tom Condon about it, but that was not done by TEDC. They bought the land without clearing the surface rights. It was that simple. So knowing all this was coming. You know, and I remember that, but that's it. I was not really involved with the Persimmon Road intersection and all that sort of thing. That wasn't part of, I went on TDC then.
Okay, I mean, as far as I know, the surface rights now have been cleared on the 2 lots.
Now they are,
Yes.
because they had to give more, but back then, we still had surface rights issue, and that's when the negotiation should have happened before that land became so valuable. And it's as simple, but that's not the issue really of when I was on TDC or not.
And that's why we were able to do the exchange deed to meet that requirement and get 2 clean sites out of that. That is exactly why we were able to do that. With that middle piece, that lot 2, we would have had to have carved out 150 feet on each side for a well site.
Right.
Why would we retain that and that be tax exempt property? That doesn't make any sense. It made sense for us to do an exchange, let Tortuga have that portion in exchange for clean sites on both sides of it, the consolidation of the crossings and the easements. And that was very much the intent and part of that, the challenges, and we bought that property back in 2016. And part of our discussion with council at that time, because that was at the same time that we entered into the bond agreement. That's the series 2016. So that was for the extension of South Persimmon, as well as Medical Complex Drive and the oversized detention that was going to be required there in lieu of extending the channel up north.
Right.
So that doesn't eliminate that channel alignment, but that does help drainage on that side. So what we did when we bought that is we started immediately going through that process of identifying all the oil and gas issues, the phase 1, the phase 2. I mean, it was a process, and there was a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort spent in cleaning up, not just the pipeline and the surface rights, but the title issues. And that's why the first offer that we got from Mr. Mladenka, which is in June of 2020, that was for 6.6 acres and it was for about 30,000 an acre. What we did is when we went and took that to the TEDC board on June 29th of 2020, we submitted that offer, as well as at that time, we were able then to bring the exchange deed offer to the board. That was for the crossings and the consolidation of all of those easements. And I have an email showing from me to Mr. Mladenka saying that we are taking those items to the board. We have an agreement to carve out a 2-acre drill site around the well on the east side of South Persimmon and convey the west side to Tortuga in exchange for surface waivers on the remaining TEDC land on the east side and the relocation of their pipelines. I am recommending approval of the agreement because it allows us to continue moving forward with the roadway project and releases the blanket easement on the remaining tracks. So that was what I recommended to the board. The board came out and in executive session directed us to withdraw our counter offer, which was the $360,000, and to basically move forward on cleaning up the title issues. And that was a big discussion that we had with the attorney of, do we want to look at even selling this? We weren't marketing this property for sale. Mr. Mladenka was interested in buying it, from 2020. And we did receive the 30,000 an acre offer. We received a counter offer of $200,000 for lot 1, which is the 2.67 acres. That's when we countered with the 360. Again, the property was not being marketed. We were still going through all of the issues with regard to the airship and the title. We got a revised offer from Mr. Mladenka of $240,000. And then that's where the TEDC board said, no, withdraw your counter. We need to focus on getting the title issue cleaned up. And that's what we did. So when we started that process in 2016, the absolute intent was for the road. what we had left over remaining, we had no idea. We had no idea if it was going to be usable. We had no idea if it was going to have oil and gas encumbrances on it. But the focus, the whole point of us buying that was to help facilitate the road project. We had invested, probably talking $15–16 million into that entire area to be in line with what the goals of the comprehensive plan show for that area. So to put a disproportionate additional requirement on a site when we haven't had to do that on any other site, it is challenging, especially when you've got a 10 acres between the two uses. So to answer your question, I do struggle with the idea of a fence there, because the long-term vision for that area from the community standpoint is like industrial.
Thank you for, that was my question. Thank you. That was my question. And so your original intent was for the road, not to turn this into more warehousing.
So our intent with this, buying this property was solely for the road.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Do you have more?
Yeah, this is Paul Medink again, 1631. Whenever the road first started being conceived, I guess 2014, I think is what I heard. That's when the vision of this all being industrial happened. It did, and as far as this piece of property that they negotiated with Tortuga on and cut out the well side. I mean, first thing I'll tell you, being my years in the oil patch, never did we have to buy surface land to produce our minerals. And another thing I'll say is that, the road came through our property too. And they didn't buy all our property. They bought what they needed for the road. And so you didn't have to buy all the land. I mean, you might say it might have made your job easier to buy it and made it cleaner, made it easier to do, but you didn't have to buy that land. And so as soon as you buy that land, in the back of your mind, you go, I know we can let go of this. I know we got city behind us and we can, put some businesses out here. We can get rid of this land. So you didn't have to buy the land, but at that point you decided right then, you have access to a market. And so as far as buying the land because it made things a little easier for your road, I don't think you should judge your how you go about doing things by how easy it is. And so just the fact that you bought the land, I mean, it tells you right there, it's going commercial. I mean, you didn't buy it to put any more homes up. So anyway, and as far as me going back and forth on an offer, I was trying to get a good deal. All right. And I was trying to get a little bit of a buffer between me and my property. And again, I might have had some thoughts about building homes out there closer to the edge of my property, but not anymore. And as far as how we go walk away here, I'll live with it, but I'm not happy about the whole way it went down with the Tortuga deal, with the fact that you have to, you had to buy it. And anyway, in my first meeting with you, and my wife remembers this, you said you bought it and you were going to use this as some kind of buffer between you and your business partner. And those were your words. That it was going to be a buffer.
Yeah, you have to gauge those comments to us. That's okay.
Anyway, that's all I had to say. I agree how tough this is, and yeah, we're lucky, we're blessed to have the property we have out there, and we're gonna do what we can to maintain what we have. But I'm also going to be reasonable and understand how the city can move in, or development and business can move in around us. It's likely we'll be the last home out there. I mean, most of the homes out there aren't nearly as new as ours. And so, yes, we've got a nice home, a nice investment, and we're just trying to protect it, protect that little piece of God's green earth. So we'll go with whatever you guys decide.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, any other discussion? So the question to council, do we call for the vote or do we call to table? I'd like to know, Councilman Ford, what's your call for the vote or call to table?
Well, I don't hold the motion, so I'd yield either way.
I think Mark has the motion and I have the second.
Okay,
I'm gonna make a motion that we vote to change it to light industrial.
I'd like to table.
I'd like to table it.
okay.
Do I need to state why? I still think we need to look at. I know y'all want to sell it, and I want you to sell it. I want you to get the best price you can to it. But I have sat here and started using wrong fussed about what happened next to me in a subdivision. It was residential completely, and they put a commercial building next door to me. And so I know what these people are going through right now. And I guarantee you the two people behind the place I'm at wished it had never been built. They're the ones that call the police. You can ask David every weekend because of the noise. And so I'd like to see it tabled till we come up with some kind of compromise that we can live with. And I know what Bill said, well, you're gonna do this on everybody. If it's between an industrial park and a resident, yeah, I think you should have to make them do it. Part of the business, Bill. And that's the way I look at it.
There's obviously some mitigating factors here anyway. They are 1,000 feet from the property line. And there's a lot of trees and that they have their own natural barrier. So I just want to take a little bit more time
I do
just to
too.
contemplate that. I mean, do we need to spend $40,000 on an 8-foot masonry wall? At 1,000 feet from a residence,
Maybe not.
with a lot of trees in between. I don't know that really is necessary. You've already got the natural buffer there and you're gonna have 20-foot buffer on the other side of the property line. So, and that's, that's already built into the development guidelines. You've got a 20-foot landscape buffer that has between the property line and the adjoining property.
Why don't we consider it a 10-foot no cut barrier?
Is there any trees between you and the fence, on the fence line?
You mean between
Yeah,
home and?
no, not your home, the fence line. I'm talking about the fence line where, right now, your property boundary.
Jessica,
Between you
can
and
you
the
put that
industrial
map
park,
up real
is
quick?
there a natural boundary of any trees between you?
Yeah, if this is accurate, if you look on the property, there are a significant number of trees. Now, I don't know that they're oaks or pines or scrub brush or.
Yeah, they're not of any significant.
I was thinking.
Right.
7 foot.
Closer to their home, towards the back. There isn't in this area. It's mainly brush.
Mainly brush, okay.
We looking at.
It's difficult to get
Yeah.
depth perception when you're looking.
But
at
there
something.
really aren't any.
Okay,
It's that first line after the curve.
This line right here, that's the property right there. So there's a 20-foot natural boundary. I thought there was a well in there somewhere.
The well is on lot 2. So what you see right there, that's a whole parcel line that is not updated. So what we bought, that the 18 acres included that overall area. So
Yes.
where her cursor is and then on the west side.
Okay,
That
where's,
was all the lot, the replat of the way it's not.
where's the well?
This is here. So here's the replat. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Lot 2, the one that's in the middle, right here.
That's for you.
Thank you.
I am qualified for this job.
So lot 2,
Amen.
which is to the middle, that's where the well is. So it is 150 feet from this boundary and 150 feet from that
Okay,
boundary.
okay, I see where the counter is.
Yes, so lot two. So this is lot one. This is the closest to their home. Along this property line, there, it's mainly brush. There's not anything substantial. This lot, which is adjacent, this one will be billiard factory. They're getting ready to construct. So this lot 3 is what we own, and this lot 1. And then that's the wellhead, and these are the battery tanks.
And did I hear you say that if we would vote on this and pass it to change it, that 20-foot boundary would stay in that place, the trees on 20-foot?
That's in the zoning ordinance now, as far as your development regulations. So that doesn't change. If a property is in a light industrial zone, they have to do that now. With the adjacency of a single family, then you have, with industrial, you have an additional height requirement. So, or landscape or setback requirement based on the height.
And it looks like that right now. That is this up to date, this.
That's pretty
GPS.
recent because it's showing the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I'm talking about for
He's talking about the
brush.
trees.
Right,
Yeah,
but
the
that's,
trees.
it's a pretty recent aerial because it is showing. the road.
It's a mix, Dane, of brush, small pine trees, but no significant like ponderosa, like.
Yeah, I know, I
Big
understand,
loblolly pine.
but
tree.
anything we built there would only be 8 foot tall too.
Yeah,
Correct?
it'd be similar.
So it'd be still a 20-foot break, 8 foot.
If it's 8 foot tall and if they're still 1,000 foot away, they're not going to see the wall.
That's right.
They'll see the top.
Okay, I'm-
Matt,
Okay.
we could look at, if.
And you got a
we
barbed wire fence now? Fence.
if we did end up selling to somebody like Nixon, which that's the offer that we have on there, we could look at requiring a site design so that either the building is more towards this area, so all the activity as far as the parking, the service area would be on the south, and there's some things we can do from a site design standpoint to help mitigate, any light bleed or anything like that. But that, I mean, I think that the issue again is really the fact that we're looking at land use here. This is not an area that's gonna be developed for single family.
No, I understand that.
And so,
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about them because I know what I went through and everything, but I did not realize, when I drove down and looked at it, I didn't realize that brush and trees were there that it's showing here. I must have thought the fence line was up a little higher because that's what I told y'all last. That I didn't think you had that many trees on the 10 acres. But okay,
Then again, I think you're asking the 20-foot buffer or that setback. There's nothing that still requires them to leave the brush. I mean, to make sure you understand.
oh, there's not,
There's a setback.
but
yeah,
there's nothing required them to leave the woods there, the brush.
no,
And then they're mad.
Well, that's what I'm asking is, can we do anything to require them to leave that?
Or the landscaping.
Trees.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. too. You've got to give them some.
You've got a landscape.
They pay the fee to tap it.
Is it possible that y'all can come back to us if we have the motions withdrawn and took no action, that y'all could come back to us with what your proposal is?
I don't know that he's done a site layout. Is that what you mean from, as far as Nixon's layout?
At least come back and give us an idea about what to put the 20-foot buffer.
Yes.
Like,
Because Nixon's not,
a tree every 20 feet or something like that, a tree that would grow to a height of 20 feet.
To me, that seems to be the compromise because, I mean, a fence is just,
Put some oak trees in there, or put some pine trees, I would prefer oak trees, because
yeah,
oak trees.
and
Hey, Mark and Dave are right. With the brush that's there, you won't even see.
Right.
any footprints.
yeah,
It's, I mean, yeah, it's brush. but
Yeah.
We just cleared the back of our plant and put the expansion on there.
yeah.
It was just brushy stuff. There were a few pine trees.
Yeah, we could leave even just the brush.
I mean, the other thing
It's
is,
not a-
well, we see the board presents a board decision, but the other thing we could do, since we still own it, So if the board wanted to plant some type of area.
I mean,
So-
I can speak. for the board. We'd rather have an elegant solution, not a hammer one way or the other.
That's when we are.
And the problem is, you know, the challenges we walked out and everybody's slightly. But, and the challenge is, how many trees is enough?
Yeah,
What do you want? You know, I don't know.
Well,
We
that-
can go back and talk to Nixon.
you know, go back and talk to the man behind you
Yeah, I mean. we can
and
go
come up
back
with a compromise.
she might even dig the
Well,
hole
and,
for you.
and, you know, I brought up earlier the fact that in these cases and looking at the research that's in, I mean, we're not the only people that struggle with this problem. A lot of people have put in landscape and then a parking area or a, you know, a parking lot basically between there and then the building. And so it gives even more buffer so that the building's just not right on the other side of the landscaping.
And that's what
And
you
so
said,
you
Kelly.
push it further down, that elevation hides the building even more so.
Yes.
When
I
I'm
like
hearing it, do we see what we can come up, with, right? With Nixon and.
I don't know that.
He may not
To
be
be honest, I don't know if we spent the money to do any kind of site layout because of not having the sense that
They can
zoning
do
was
it.
going to.
I mean, so my question would be, can we put it in our contract back to him, so that he's got it, there has to be a 20-foot buffer, I understand that. But we'll leave some of the brush in 10 feet and plant some trees in there.
Yeah, I mean, we as the board, you could, and in our special permission amendment, which is gonna go as the deed restrictions, you could put design requirements, you could put standards for site layout, all that.
Yeah.
That it's, the challenge comes in the long-term enforcement. So as it's getting built, we can control that, right? Because we have them put on the process of it getting built. Once that's done, right, I'm gone, and you're gone, everybody's gone. If we have a buffer in there, I mean, it's gonna be down to an enforcement issue. Somebody comes in later on and wants to clear that buffer and put something else in. Nobody's gonna be here to remember all of it. Maybe one day, but
It's in the documents.
what I mean from the standpoint is to enforce it, is what I mean. There's, if you have it in the deed restrictions, it's easy to enforce it on the front end while it's being built. The long term is.
You're right.
Did we get to our tree preservation ordinance?
But you're right. Deed restrictions can only be enforced through the district attorney.
All right, in all of this discussion, we are going to take no action and not call this for a vote. I was checking Robert's rules.
Well,
Or do we-
So-
Sure.
Be sure, yeah.
Then we have to
Then let's-
withdraw.
If we want to take a vote to retract the motion, that's just to be sure.
If we had a buffer landscaping on that site, how big of a area would you want? Just to see, just so I'm not shooting in the dark here.
I mean, you're looking at a 20-foot deep requirement right now anyway.
That's it.
That's it.
So if that's all required, I don't think we have an issue with putting that into the contract with that development.
We just have to get some trees.
Yeah, heights.
And the other thing about it is, like you said, enforcement. You know, and that's why I will know about the enforcement of it later on.
Well, but
So,
you transferred the property, the HOA of the commercial development to the members, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they have,
This lot is not a part of,
that's right.
yes, that's why the deed
Okay.
restrictions are.
So then we need to go to a tree preservation ordinance. To make sure that they get the trees planted, and then we have a tree preservation ordinance that they just can't go willy-nilly and bulldozer.
And Kelly, you can go back to him, tell him we're gonna pass it, change the zoning once we get something done like
And
this.
I don't think it's an issue as far as, he can design around that. It's really more. Would you rather the separation be, from a site design standpoint, the building oriented as far south as possible.
Mhm.
With the parking to the north,
I
because
think so.
you're gonna have more activity with the parking area than you would with the wall building wall. So that, and then that's, and I'm only saying that because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste your time and our time. I'd like to at least have some direction so that I can bring you something for following you guys can look at and go, okay, this makes sense.
Trees and shrubbery.
Can you get the landowner involved too, or is it just gonna be the TDZ?
As far as,
What goes there? Or any suggestions from them?
I guess that's what I'm
That's what they're asking y'all right now. Do y'all rather have a parking there or would you rather have the building first? Well, it's a metal building. Okay, but it's not part of that yet. So you have to deed it.
We control, it's all gonna be in.
Okay, so it's gonna be the same
Same action. He's gonna build it just like he built the ones up on
Okay.
Spell Circle. You wanna see what they look like, go up on Spell Circle and look at all those buildings. Those are all mixed.
Those are all nice buildings.
So he is dedicated to the area. So he is not in any mad rush to go to another area and build at this time.
Yeah, but we need to get them an answer.
He's very slow and oh, I shouldn't say that. I don't
think
know,
he's-
but he's not gonna have shovel ready next week. Or so
So this is the north.
waiting on this to get it right is okay.
He does a nice building.
Oh, yeah, that's
There's
not
two
metal.
more
buildings.
under construction on lot 15. So that whole cul-de-sac he owns, other than the Suez building right there. But that would be very similar to what he would be looking at doing on lot 1. It'd be 25,000 square feet. He does an identical product.
Yeah.
And he is a long-term holder of his investments. He builds out the office, so when he is able to complete construction, it's turnkey. The office is done, it's 3,000 square feet. That's why we worked with Nixon in the first place, because it gave us an advantage to be able to offer a building for businesses that needed to move right away.
Move in ready.
I think it's helpful.
Yes. The two that are under construction, I believe he's pretty high.
This is for all of them. Okay.
I mean, I'll say this, I mean, my preference would be the brush and the trees versus a fence. You go up to the woodlands and you drive around the woodlands. And they probably don't even have a 20-foot buffer of trees in that. You can't see what's behind those roads. There's probably lots of businesses up there I'd probably shop at if I just knew they were.
Yeah. Past many.
My biggest question is, like, right now, just down the road with we can hear loud music. So I don't know what the building's gonna be, it's just gonna be a warehouse.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it would be a warehouse.
Um,
They would probably, office hours would probably be 8 to 5.
Is what we decide here for this specific instance, or are we trying to set a precedent for, let's just say, the other side of my house?
No tree.
I mean, we're much closer. And I mean, it's a whole different situation, obviously. And so I didn't know if we were trying to help, the council, write some, rules or, get some guidelines for future goings on. I agree. This, I mean, if we want to treat this as a kind of a specific instance, it doesn't need, legislation all around it. I'm sure we can work something.
It won't work for the rest of our, on the other side. Nice, so.
I mean, right now, all we're talking about is this section, these 4 lots.
I agree with you. I'd rather, out there where it's now a wall, it almost looks silly.
Yep.
Right.
Right, but we're trying to fight off before it gets too close.
No, I understand that.
I'm sure we can get together.
And there's a combination of like a shrub wall and some trees, so you have kind of that, the visual driving down the road being blocked and then a little bit higher. I mean, we could require that. I need to know if the issue is from a development standpoint, more intrusive to y'all, if it's designed where the parking is closer facing your property, or the building be oriented that way and the parking facing south. I think so too, and we could make it so that they can't have lights on that side of the building. And there's some things from a site design standpoint that I think we can do, so it's not intrusive. But I need some direction on what is it that we're, what is it that we're.
Check the fire marshal, but I think you probably still have to have 360-degree access around the building.
Well,
Yeah.
he knows that. All of his building there is not there.
Okay.
Okay, so to take no action until they can get together and come back with a suggestion for this buffer. Councilman Stahl, we need to come to order. Bill, sweetheart.
Throw your can at it.
Councilman Stoll, you would have to withdraw your motion, and Councilman Parr, you would
Well,
have to
where
withdraw
do
your
we-
second.
Where does council stand right now with what we've just discussed?
If the two parties are willing to work together to move forward and they feel that they can do so, then we should go ahead and move forward with the action.
Yes.
I think I could have something that we hopefully can agree on by second reading to at least show you, this is what we're looking at for regulations.
Yeah, and then to answer your question on the north side, we're still working on development guidelines, so give us an opportunity to work through that.
I know it's specific to the zoning base, but I was trying to see it.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we have a motion and a second. This is the first reading, so
Turn my computer off.
to approve or disapprove the zoning. Zoning ordinance number 2022-38 on first reading. Contemplating that on second reading, we would have the compromise brought back by GDC and the Medicas. Okay. So call for the vote.
Aye.
Oh. Have to put your number back in.
It's completely dead.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we still will have one more reading on this option and one more chance to vote on this option. So motion to adjourn this short workshop.
Motion.
Second.
Okay,
Aye.
call for the vote.
So we got a vote.
Let's vote.
Well, I'm trying to.
Oh,
I'm hitting refresh and
Put me as aye.
okay, we're adjourned.
it wouldn't refresh.